Is it a happy coincidence that the mayoral things come along at the same time that you're leaving the job?
So I actually have resigned because I've chosen to stand for mayor. So I wasn't thinking about resigning from Xero. These opportunities, they often say the train comes to the station, and this time it comes once every 3 years, and so basically it's now or wait another 3 years.
And you're a centre-right candidate if we had to put you on the spectrum.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to be labelled, which everyone seems very keen to label me, is I do believe in the values of transparency and fiscal responsibility, and I think I share that with the centre-right. It's really important, though, I do stand as an independent candidate. I am focused on issues across all of Auckland, not what side of the political spectrum you're on, and we'll be dealing with the issues for Auckland.
Do you see it as a hurdle or an advantage coming into politics, for a job like Mayor of Auckland as an outsider?
I think it's definitely got its advantages. Having had a wide range of experience in areas that Auckland has some issues at the moment. And what I mean by that is I worked in big infrastructure businesses in terms of rollout of big infrastructure programs. I've worked in Xero, obviously, which is a high growth company, and Auckland's population is growing at quite the rate of knots at the moment. So having that experience across infrastructure, how do you get efficient in really big organisations, but with agile thinking of growth, I think is an asset.
There's possibly a bit to understand about politics, and I notice on your website one of the issues you put up is what you see as the growth in the council staff since it began. But when you look into the council figures and they start to explain what's happened, in fact they say that the core staff is smaller than the figure that was projected when the council started, and what looks like growth is in fact things like having to add the Ports of Auckland staff to the numbers. And so the idea that the council staff is sometimes somehow bloated is not correct. Is that something you've still got to get your head around?
No, I think I'm getting my head around it really fast. And what I'm observing, I've talked to quite a few people, prior to launch and particularly post, announcing on Monday. And there's a big difference in the perception of what Auckland Council is doing and what Aucklanders think Auckland Council is doing. So, part of the role of an effective mayor is to understand, is that real or not? And so people are asking, I think, some very valid questions. So the costs for staff that I raised were actually the total value costs. So it wasn't the specific numbers, it was the value. And I think, where there's a 30% increase in what was expected in terms of the study of what Auckland was supposed to be when the super city came together versus where it's at now, it does need to be looked at. And I think the second point is around transparency. There's nothing from council that actually provides the transparency for us as ratepayers to have a look at, well, really, where are all these costs coming from? I know a few people have tried via the Official Information Act and get different responses. So I think there needs to be some transparency on the other side as well.
So what do you need to know? What do Aucklanders need to know that they don't know at the moment? Because, it's not a flat line thing. Auckland's growing, it needs more stuff happening. What is it you need to know about staff or costs that you don't?
So I think Aucklanders need to know and are certainly telling me that they want a council that's run efficiently. That covers things like staff costs, where our investment are going. The information earlier this week where the IT system blowout went by around $80 million. So they want to know that their city is being run well, governed well, and is as efficient as possible. At the end of the day, the people funding the city and responsible for the debt of the city is the ratepayers.
But can you point to something and say to them, it's not being run well? You talk about the perception out there, but is the problem the perception rather than the reality? How do you deal with that?
I think it's too early to tell, and it does depend on who you talk to. So definitely the council have put in place some performance benchmarks. They are self-imposed benchmarks, is my understanding. What would be great is to actually say, let's work out not benchmarking ourselves against New Zealand, other New Zealand councils, but let's benchmark ourselves against cities that are having the same issues as us globally. So on some metrics it all looks good, and it all comes down to what do you measure yourself on, and I think that's what needs a look at.
All of the leading candidates have the same issues for Auckland: housing, transport. How do we pay for what needs to be done? Housing's an interesting one because it's not directly in the council's control. How would you want to improve the shortage of housing and the cost?
I think housing, you're right, there is a limited amount that the council can actually do to accelerate the housing area. However, if I think about housing, I think about it in a if you like, a value chain. So you've got the land availability and then the consent process. Then you've got the infrastructure that you need to put in the ground around the subdivision, the house or the development. And then you've got the building sector, and then you've got the selling sector of it. So I think what I would be keen to explore is to make sure that everything has been done in every part. Now, up until now, certainly a lot is being done in the consents process, the land availability process. However, there is still much work to be done, and the government and the council are working on this in the productivity area in terms of the building, also in terms of things when you don't have confidence or certainty as an investor, it's harder to invest. So what I'm hearing from some of the developers is there's not enough certainty in the things like the unitary plan and what the council are doing for them to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into this development. So breaking it down and making sure right across that every party in the chain is really important.
But what can you bring to that? I mean, the unitary plan is rolling along and will be wrapped up late next year. What can you as mayor add to that?
Plenty in terms of the way that the mayor works with the other people in the chain to make this work for Aucklanders. And at the end of the day, the mayor is the person who feels and represents Auckland on the issues. And you know what is I'm bordering on sad is, talking to some kids, I talked to them about a week or so ago, and they're worried about their future ability to buy a house. And these kids are 14 and 16. That's a real concern. And then also making sure the council can make sure that that we are actually delivering our part of it. So we are not being a roadblock to stopping any of the rest of the chain working.
Transport, you've shown an interest in looking at, well, you've referred to what's being done at the moment as partly old world solutions. How would you deal with that one? I mean, we're having enough trouble paying for today's transport issues. Where would the money come from to look at something futuristic?
Well, I think it's really around, I break it down a little bit differently than that, so if I can just take a minute to explain it. So yes, you've got the city rail loop, which is very expensive investment in infrastructure, and we need to make sure that is done very well. So we can't afford to have any cost blowouts on that. It's got to work the first time, and we've got to make sure that infrastructure is lined up to where the people are going to be. So there's a few risks in that. I've raised a couple of areas where, in my discussions around council and with people around council, that I haven't seen a lot of thinking out of council. And the two areas are driverless, and the other area is remote working. So we know that 80 to 90% of New Zealanders actually want to remote work 1 to 2 days a week. I don't know what Auckland looks like, but that's New Zealand. We know in the States that 43% of them do remote work. So I'm just interested in saying we've got the infrastructure for remote working now. We've got cloud services, we've got fibre into a lot of Auckland. What about if we just had a wee chat about saying how could we get some of our traffic completely off the road by utilising technology for people to remote work at home? And perhaps the council could work with universities and some of the leading corporates in Auckland to trial this and understand what's the impact on productivity, what's the impact on traffic. And if there is something in there, which my gut says there is, because a lot of cities are doing this, then we should have a damn good look at it. And that's not requiring a lot of investment. That's just saying we believe there's a solution here that hasn't been tapped. And then the driverless one is purely, I'm not saying we're going to have driverless cars in the next 5 years everywhere in Auckland. It's just saying we need to understand that it's coming, and in 10 to 20 years it will be here, and it's an alternative form of transport. It shifts the volume of traffic 50 to 100 times is what the early studies are saying. I just think we need to look at it.
But should Auckland be putting money into that sort of thing, or should we leave it to somebody else?
I think we should be partnering, like what happened with Google with the balloons down south in terms of piloting, internet for third world countries. We're an amazing country to pilot with for these global companies. So yes, we should be on the blower. It doesn't have to be the council, but someone needs to be thinking about it in Auckland in terms of on the blower to the likes of Google and some partners and saying, okay, let's get a prototype and a pilot up and at least just understand it.
In business, you're the boss. If people around you aren't on board, you can get rid of them. In politics, you're locked in there with 20 other councillors. How do you see your ability to be able to deal with that, people from all sorts of different backgrounds and viewpoints?
Yeah, so in business, yes, absolutely. Part of the way you get your job done is by working with your team, but it's much broader than that. You need to work across your organisation, and there's clearly politics involved in that in different organisations that you're in. You need to work across other companies as well. I've done a lot of work with government departments, industry partners, etc. And so you do need to use your skills of working together in terms of, setting where do we want to go, creating the relationships, understanding each other and working out where is the ground that we can work together. So, business is not just about telling the people who work for you what to do.
A slightly random question. You're the mayor, you've got to buy a mayoral car. What are you buying?
Well, I've already got a car, so I'll probably just keep those. Yeah.
So the job comes with a car? You don't want to do something?
Look, I haven't even thought about that. I'm kind of a bit more focused on what are the big issues and making sure we're understanding those. Yeah, I haven't got that far.
Victoria Crone, can I let you finish this sentence? I'm the best choice to be Mayor of Auckland because...
Because I have very strong governance and leadership experience, because I do have a very strong track record of performance and fiscal performance, and because I have a lot of experience in how do you solve problems in a slightly different way.